What's up, guys? My name is Stu, and today we are talking about my top 5 favorite ships in Star Trek Online. Star Trek Online has a lot of playable ships. A lot of playable ships. Seriously, a lot. It's kind of ridiculous at this point. But we all have our favorites. Sometimes it's due to how a ship looks, how a ship handles, its ship's particular stats. There's a bunch of different factors. We're going to do this in an ascending order, so we're going to start with number 5 of my top favorite ships to play in Star Trek Online. And that ship is the Constitution Miracle Worker Flight Deck Carrier. It's a Discovery-era Constitution class, it's a flight deck carrier, so it has 2 hangar bays, and it's a Miracle Worker ship. How can you not love this thing? I really like energy weapon builds, so Miracle Worker is a great pairing for that, thanks to narrow sensor bands and mixed armament synergy. Making this thing a flight deck carrier was just a brilliant decision in my opinion. Sure, it makes no sense because there's no way the Constitution actually has that much room for that many hangar bays, but it's just fun. There's something special about flying a Constitution-class ship with your own small fleet of fighters following you around. Now, there is another version of this ship, the legendary Temporal version, which, don't get me wrong, is also a really great ship, but I do like this one more. And that is largely because its seating is better suited to a certain type of build that I like to fly. Well, not so much fly, but sit in. That's right, I'm talking about my lazy boat. There aren't a lot of ships that are flight deck carriers and well suited to energy weapon builds, and even fewer that can support my full 360-degree build of nonsense. And, frankly, none of them look this good either. Well, I guess technically the Temporal version does because it's literally the same model, but you know what I mean. It's the Discovery Constitution. This thing is gorgeous. It's such a great modern update to the classic Constitution design. I know some people gripe about continuity and the fact that it's like twice as big as the original Constitution, but I don't care. It's pretty, and frankly, I like big ships. Number 4 is a very different ship, and probably the most different out of this entire list, the Animate Heavy Raider. While normally I like to fly big, chunky cruisers, sometimes you get the itch to fly something small and nimble. Being a Heavy Raider, this ship does have an added incentive for piloting, because Raider flanking gives a bonus damage buff when firing on your enemy's aft arc. And while the ship doesn't have any pilot seating, it still is fast and maneuverable enough to accomplish such a task. Actually, the fact that it doesn't have any pilot seating is part of the reason why I like this ship so much, because it's actually an intel ship with a secondary temporal seat, meaning instead of beam overload or cannon scatter volley, I can make this into a surgical strikes build. That kind of change in pace is kind of nice to have sometimes. Plus, intel and temporal have a nice number of abilities that will interact with unconventional systems. Another reason why I like this ship is because it's actually a variant of everyone's favorite tough little ship, the Defiant. Though honestly, I actually find myself often using the Adamant skin rather than the Defiant. I really like the Adamant's look. The pointier, almost spearhead-shaped hull makes it more aggressive looking than the Defiant, and I love the nacelles on this thing because they actually kind of look like proper warp nacelles from a Federation ship that also kind of blend into a more Defiant-type nacelle. I think it's a great look that's a fantastic successor to the Defiant. A couple other cool things about the ship is that it comes with a fantastic console, it comes with Agony Phaser versions of the quad cannons, and who doesn't love the quad cannons? They have the most satisfying sound effect for cannons because they sound like the actual pulse phasers used on the Defiant in the show. Speaking of the show, its experimental weapon actually looks like the torpedoes used by the Defiant in Deep Space Nine. And lastly, this thing has a built-in battle cloak. Really, this is a fantastic little ship, and I'm honestly surprised it's not more popular than it is. I really don't think the Adamant got as much attention as it deserved when the 12th anniversary bundle came out. Though I guess that could be because of another ship that came in that bundle, which you will see further up this list. But before we get to that, first we have to move up to number 3 on the list, and that is the Temporal Light Cruiser. This ship, honestly, has so many great things going for it. It has one of the most well-rounded bridge officer seatings in the game. It's a temporal ship, so you can use Recursive Shearing 3 on it, which goes great with a beam overload build. It also has a Lieutenant Commander command seat, so it makes a great torpedo build. It only has 4 bridge officer seats, but none of them go below Lieutenant Commander, so it has a nice amount of high-level bridge officer abilities. It's a cruiser, so you can make it into a decent tank build. And the fact that it's a temporal ship with a Lieutenant Commander Science seat and a Lieutenant Commander Universal seat, you could even put a decent EPG build on it. Seriously, you could set this ship up however you want and it'll actually do it pretty well. The ship is a light cruiser, so it's quite a bit smaller than most cruisers in the game, but it's also more maneuverable than most cruisers in the game, which pairs great with the ship's 5-3 weapons layout, so a forward-facing build is not going to be any problem. But the greatest thing about the ship is the fact that it's not just one Constitution class, it's actually 2. Because this ship can use the original series and motion picture era Constitution skins. Actually, it's technically 3 because it also has the version of the Enterprise from the Cage. There's a reason this ship has been on my top 10 ships to pick for the event campaign twice in a row, because it really is just that good. Honestly, the ship's only downside is that it's a promo ship, so it's hard to get, but that's why I recommend it for the event campaign. Now let's move on to number 2 before Q yells at me for putting what he calls the best ship in the game in the number 3 slot. In the number 2 slot is the legendary Verity Command Dreadnought Cruiser, aka the legendary Odyssey. Now, I'm sure a lot of you know at this point that the Yorktown is not just my favorite ship in Star Trek Online, but in Star Trek in general, so it should be no surprise to see an Odyssey variant here on this list. I remember when this ship was announced and man, I was so excited. Because before this, if I wanted to fly my favorite ship, I usually did it in the Endeavour Star Cruiser, which, I mean, I wouldn't call it a bad ship, but it's certainly not a great ship, especially at this point in the game. But then this ship came along. Not only was this legendary version upgraded to a full command ship, but they also changed it from a Star Cruiser to a Dreadnought, which meant that my favorite ship was also getting a hangar bay. It also meant that it became a fantastic platform for a torpedo build and a tank build. Even though it is best suited to those two build types, I also ran several different kinds of energy weapon builds on it as well. In fact, I think this is one of the first ships I made one of my canon-inspired builds for, which are builds that are based off of the actual lore of Star Trek rather than just what's meta. Being a legendary ship, it includes all of the previous consoles from the Tier 5 and Tier 6 versions of the Odysseys. Those Tier 5 consoles are very gimmicky and have next to no effect on your DPS, but they can still be a lot of fun. In fact, I'm still rather fond of the Aquarius console, though I would be more fond of it if they actually fixed the animation on that thing. But that's just because that's one of the things I really liked about the Odyssey. It basically has its own little pocket defiant that it takes with it wherever it goes. Plus it also has a saucer separation, which is cool for some more TNG vibes. The Tier 6 consoles are meant to be a bit more practical. However, I've never found them that useful on this ship because they're better suited to energy weapon builds. And like I said, this ship is better suited to torpedo builds and tanks. However, they can be quite useful on the last ship on the list. May have been a bit surprised to hear that my favorite ship ended up in the number 2 spot, but that's because the number 1 spot is also taken by an Odyssey variant, the Lexington Dreadnought Cruiser. This is, without a doubt, my favorite ship in the game. Remember when I talked about how the Animate really wasn't as popular as I think it deserved to be? I'm pretty sure this ship is why. It's a Dreadnought Cruiser like the previous ship, but this one's a Miracle Worker ship, so it's better suited to energy weapon builds. It also has a secondary intel seat, giving it some extra unconventional systems triggers. But the really fun part is that not only can it use all the consoles from the previous Odysseys, and not only does it still have a hangar bay like the previous Odyssey, but this one also has a Spinal Lance. A Spinal Lance isn't super helpful for DPS, largely because you can't lower its cooldown, but man is that one satisfying button to press. Another added bonus to this ship is that while it is still a Dreadnought, it's actually more maneuverable than the legendary version. Only a little bit, but it's still noticeable. Visually, this ship is still very similar to the Yorktown class, but it does have a few added details, mainly a Spinal Lance cannon underneath the saucer, and a large torpedo pod that extends upward from between the two nacelles. I do really like the pod, largely because a lot of people have taken to calling it the ship's hat, which, I mean, you guys know how I am with hats, but honestly, I actually like the standard Yorktown skin better, mostly because it feels like a Federation ship you would see as a hero ship in one of the shows. The Galaxy X feels more like the All Good Things version of the Galaxy class. It's one of those cool things that shows up for a special story arc or episode, but the Yorktown has more hero ship vibes, if you know what I mean. Another really nice thing about the Lexington is that, like the Animate, this one is also a normal C-Store ship, making it more accessible to most players than the legendary version, which is only available in the 10th anniversary bundle. So yeah, those are my top 5 favorite Star Trek Online ships. You know, for now. Stow's always putting out new ships, this could change. What are your guys' favorite ships to play in Star Trek Online? Let me know it down in the comments down below. While you're down there, be sure to hit that like button and the subscribe button, and maybe hit that bell for notifications. A big thank you to my members for supporting the channel in the way you guys do. I really do appreciate it. You'll see their names in the outro screen in a bit. If you'd like to become a member to further support the channel, hit that join button down below. Either way, thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. My name's Stu, and I will see you guys next time.